Okay, so otherwise we continue with the lecture that is about mathematical morphology of gray images. So just a reminder, so we were seeing dilation. So dilation was the maximum of a displaced, it is better here. So it is the maximum of the image plus the displaced kernel. And now we will define the erosion. So the erosion is the minimum of the image. Yeah, so here we are using the same, you may remind, yeah, this one, sorry. Okay, so it is the minimum of the image minus the displaced kernel. So before it was the maximum of the image plus the displaced kernel. Now it is the image minus the displaced kernel and the minimum. And here what we have in this algorithm, this small pseudocode is just reading the formula. So the formula means, okay, so you keep the image fixed. And then for all, you take every point P in the support of the input image, and then for every point P, you compute the support of set displaced to P. So that will give you the points Q. And then you have to compute what is the kernel or the structuring element evaluated at Q minus P, and then you subtract the image minus that thing. And then you take the minimum. This is a set, because this is evaluated for all Qs. And then you compute the minimum of this set. Okay, so let's see an example. So if you have this original image, this one here with the big cones, and you compute the erosion is just these small cones. Okay, so let's see why. So you have to keep the image fixed. So let me copy this. Copy and start. Okay, so we start the whiteboard. Cuéntanos un chiste, Ana. Cuéntanos un chiste. No, cuando uno va subiendo por la escalera va pensando. Okay, so we have to take the point in the input image. So we take the point in the input image, this one. So this one, and you place your structuring element there. And then you have to evaluate I minus the shifted kernel. So this is Q, and this is I of Q. So you have to shift your kernel to P. This is the point P. And then you have to evaluate all the points coming from this, so I minus Z. Z is 0, actually. But you have to evaluate that for all the points. So you have to compute this for all the points belonging to this support. Okay, so belonging to this area. Okay, so among all those points, you have this, you have all this region there. So you are subtracting this point. So you have to compute the minimum of all this area. Okay, so all this area here, and the minimum of all that area is running out of colors at these points in the border, right? So the output at this point is the point in the border, because it is the minimum in the area. And then only when you get the structuring element inside, now you start to get points that are different from the border. So that is why you're decreasing everything. And the same happens at the peak. So at the peak, you place the structuring element at the peak, but you have to take the minimum in all this grid area. And then the minimum in the green area is this one. So that is why you are decreasing the size of the peak. And remember that outside, by convention, we have said that outside where the foreground is, we have a minus infinity value. So the minimum is always minus infinity. So the background is set to minus infinity. Okay, so yeah. So here we are. So now we know how to compute the erosion. And there are other ways of computing the erosion. So in the same way as in the convolution, you can keep the image fixed and move the kernel, or keep the kernel fixed and move the image. This is the expression for moving the image. So now you are moving the image to all locations of the support of the structuring element that has been mirrored. Okay? And remember that it has to be mirrored in both ways. In a space, so that is why you have the minus Q, but also in intensity, and then you have the minus Z. And here we have the result of the erosion. So the erosion, you may remember, it was a way of removing the peaks of the image. So if you have an image with a white spot in binary images, the erosion was the way to remove the small white spots. And here you can see it, for instance, here at the boot. So you see all these buttons here, they have small white peaks in the middle. So the small white peaks are removed from the loaded image. Okay, so they are all filled with the background. And yeah, so again, for the moment, it is not a very useful operation, but we will construct using the dilation and the erosion to construct more useful operations. So just a reminder how the dilation looks like. So the dilation makes the image brighter, while the erosion makes it darker. Okay, so now we have the opening. So the opening was an erosion followed by a dilation. And here you have the final result and the original image. So it is first you erode, so you make the cones lower. And now you dilate, and then you make it bigger. And by doing that, what you are getting rid of is the peaks of the bright peaks. So the bright peaks disappear. So the image stays more or less the same, but without the bright peaks. Yes, so here you have all the steps. So you have the opening, that is this one, and the shaded one, and the erosion that is inside. So when you dilate this erosion, you come to this shaded shape. And here you have the three of them. So you have the original, the opening, and the erosion. Yeah, the way to express that, well, it is simply the definition. So the opening is first you erode and then you dilate with the same structuring element. And the closing is almost the same. So first you dilate and then you erode. But instead of using the structuring element, you are using the reflected structuring element. So here you have the opening. So we are getting rid of the bright peaks in the opening. So the bright peaks disappear here. And in the closing, what you are getting rid of is of the valleys. So the valleys disappear in the closing. So you have a valley, for instance, between these two cones, and then the valley is filled. And again, the 3 steps to achieve that. So we have the original. Well, this one down is the closing. And then what we have here is the dilation. So first you dilate. So just a reminder. First you dilate and then you erode. So the big one is the dilated one, and then you erode the dilated one to get this whole field. And here we have the original also. So we have the original, the closed, and then the dilated one. And so here it is how it looks like. So now the valleys should disappear. So I don't know if I will be able to find the valley. The valley is a dark valley between two bright ones. Yeah, for instance, here in the fingers. Fingers are a bit filled, you see? So the fingers is a valley. You have a bright valley, then a dark one, and then a bright one again. And then they are filled. You see? And very often with this mathematical morphology operations, you see the shape of the structuring element. You may see here small discs. So these small discs are caused by the shape of the structuring element. Okay, so as we had before with the binary images, we have also Morgan laws for the grayscale images. So you have all kind of complements and operations with the complements. So for instance, the opening can be expressed as the complement of I complement closed with the structuring element. So remember, with the Morgan's laws, you have to change the operator and the sets. So the operator, if this is an erosion, this is an erosion, it has to be a dilation, and then if you have a set, you need the complement of that set. And for the structuring elements, typically it is just a reflection. Not always, you see here, it is not the reflection of this one, but so you may need a reflection. Okay, so so here we have a summary of all these operators. So let's say that we have this original image, and then our kernel will be this one, and then we have the dilation, erosion. So dilation is making the bright parts bigger with the shape, the structuring element. So for instance, this is a square, but after making it bigger with the shape of the structuring element, it becomes a kind of L. And erosion is the opposite. It's making the dark parts bigger. So now this dark part here is bigger, and the same here. And again, with the shape of the structuring element. And then the opening is removing the high peaks. So this high peak here has disappeared. And the closing is removing the valleys. So this valley here disappears. And again, always with the shape of the structuring element. And Yeah, and this here you have another example, dilation with Z square. So now with Z mirror. So instead of having the L, you have the inverted L. Okay, so let's construct more operators. So another operator could be this top hat. So the top hat is the difference between the open image and the original. So the open image is removing the peaks. Okay, so what is the difference? The difference are the peaks. So the top hat is defined as the original minus the open. And the same, yeah, so here it is. Okay, so now, so the opening is removing the peaks. Okay, so now what we have are the peaks. So here, what we have are the peaks. And now what we have is a peak detector that we didn't have before. So we had edge detectors, but we didn't have peak detectors. So now we have a peak detector. And the bot hat is the opposite. So the bot hat is what have you added to the closing? So what have you added to the original to get the closing? So this filling of valleys. So what is the fill that you have used to fill the valley? So it can be defined as the closing minus the original. So this is what you have used to fill the valley. And in this case, it is this one. And the closing was a valley removal operator. So the bot hat now it is a detector of valleys. So it is a detector of holes in the image. So now the eyes, for instance, they appear very clearly in the bot hat. And the same for the boot here. You see all these buttons in the boot. They appear, the fingers. So the hole between fingers. So now we have more useful operations, but to get to these useful operators, we have made use of the opening, the closing, the dilation, the erosion that as such, they are not very appealing images. So this image has very little detail. But it is a part of an intermediate result for getting something more useful. Okay, so yeah, so here we have the top hat, the bottom hat, and we can even, for instance, make top hat minus bottom hat. So we combine both in the same image. So now we have a valley and a peak detector at the same time. And also we can do reconstructions. So reconstruction, you may remember from the previous lecture. Let us see. So from the previous lecture, it was the operator that produced this result. So you had some noise, salt and pepper noise, and then it was the one that was getting rid of those points, the small points. So we can have the equivalent now in Grayscale. So in Grayscale, it is also called reconstruction, and the procedure is almost the same. So you start with an opening, and then what you do is you get the opening, dilate with a structuring element, and then you compute the minimum between the original and the dilated one. And if the image has changed, then you repeat it. Okay, so you dilate again, and then you take the minimum between the input and the input original and the current one, and if the image has changed, you dilate again, and so on. Okay, so let's see how it works. Okay, so let's take this original image. This is the opening. So the opening is removing the peaks. And now this is the reconstructed image. So it recovers, so the opening is removing the peaks, but then the reconstruction recovers a bit of the peak. And here we have more examples. So for instance, this is the original, this is the open one, and this is the reconstructed one. So in the reconstruction, well, it is halfway between the opening and the original, so you don't fully recover the peak, but you get the shape of the peak. So just the opening. So if we use the opening as a peak removal, we also lose a lot of the shape of the image. So here we have an X shape, and the X is not represented in the opening. But in the reconstructed, it is much better represented. And then here you have all kind of differences. So you can see that the open one is more dissimilar to the original one than the reconstructed one. So the reconstructed is almost the same as the original, except at the peak. So the peak has been lost, but the opening had also lost all these kind of X shape. So yeah, so here is the original, here is the reconstructed opening. So in the same way as we thought of the reconstruction in binary images, so the reconstruction in gray images is kind of noise removal. So if you have noise, you may use this reconstructed opening to get rid of the noise. So that we can compare to the opening. This is opening and original, reconstructed opening and the opening. So you recover quite a lot with this reconstruction. So you see the opening has lost a lot of information, but then by this process of iteratively dilating, taking the minimum, dilating, taking the minimum, you recover quite a lot of the information you lost. Any questions? No? Okay, so otherwise we move to the last lecture of the course. There is JPEG image compression. So JPEG is probably a file format. So a file format is, okay, so we have focused in the course on the image content. So you have an image. And now we know we have numbers in these images. So we have 0, I don't know, 25, 120, whatever numbers. And we have focused also mostly on images that are unsigned integers of 8 bits. So images between 0 and 255. But we know that an image in general is a function that goes from R squared, so a grayscale image. So it goes from R squared to R, or as we were doing before, from Z squared. So we have a regular tree onto 0 to 255. Actually, better notation is this one. When you have finite sets, with curly brackets. Okay, so yeah, we have focused in this kind of integer valued images, but it could have any value here. So you could have a value minus 0.13 plus 0.05, whatever. So as long as you have a matrix with numbers, that's an image. Okay, so, but that is the content. If you want to save that content in a disk, what do you have to save? So, what are sensible things to save? So the minimum I would say it is, let's say that this is an image of size 256 to 56. So I would say the minimum bytes you need to store would be 256, 256, and then the values. And then you store all the values. Yeah, so here you have 256 times 256 bytes. So here what we have is what is the size in X, what is the size in Y, and then the content, which is the content. So this is the minimum that you need to say. And also it would be useful to say, for instance, okay, so let's say that we want to consider both kinds of images. So images that have integer values and images that have real values. So it would be useful to say here what kind of images you want to save. So for instance, let's say that we write 1. So let's make it we make 1 if we want to save bytes, and we say 4 if we want to save floats, for instance. And this is our convention. If you find a 1, then you know that the content is written in bytes. If you find a 4, then you know that the content is written in floats. And then this number of bytes is not this one. It is this one multiplied by 4, because every float takes 4 bytes. Okay, so this would be a very, very basic file format. This part here, all this, is called the header. So typically, when you save an image, you have a header, and then you have the image content. So this is the content. So yeah, so this is a very, very basic header. You can imagine that we can save a lot of things about the image, and JPEG is one way of defining how to save images, and it will affect both. It will affect the header. So what is the structure of the header? What we are saving in the header, but also the content. How you save the content? So you can use this kind of content that is called raw content. So if this is just the matrix, you write the matrix. Or you can be more intelligent and try to save fewer numbers so that you save a space. Okay, so yeah, let's see how that is done. Okay, so it is based on this paper that is 91, that is the year of the standard, and it was the outcome of this of an experts group. So the CCIDT, that is an international committee for telecommunications things, and so they set up a committee. And the ISO is also another committee for standardization, International Standardization Organization, or something like that. So they set up a committee that were experts in image processing, and they decided how to save images in an efficient way. And yeah, at the end, it was published in this standard. Okay, so we want a standard that allows us to compress images and with a very high quality, and that allows you to choose what is the trade-off between the quality and the compression ratio. So there is no free lunch. So if you want to compress a lot, you have to sacrifice quality. And if you don't want to sacrifice quality, then you have to store a lot of numbers. And be applicable to any kind of continuous images and be very easy to implement and to decode. So let's say that when you have a saved image in JPEG, when you load it, you have to undo all the processes that the encoder have done. So we will see it later, but the idea is that when you have an image, so you have your image here. Sorry, let's make it black as it was. So you have your image here, and it will go to an encoder. So it goes to an encoder. An encoder produces a JPEG file, and then you have an decoder, and this decoder has to produce something that is similar to the original image. So you don't want this decoder to take a lot of time. In encoding, depending on what is your application, but in encoding, typically you have more time. But the decoder, you will perform this once, while this one, you will perform it many times. So every time you load an image, you have to decode it. So you want this operation to be very fast. Okay, so yeah, so that are different. Yeah, the encoder allows different ways of encoding. We will see a few of them. So this sequential encoding, progressive encoding, lossless, hierarchical. So the sequential, for instance, it encodes every band at a time. Then the progressive, what it does is that at the beginning of the file, you have a kind of this coarse-to-fine encoding. So coarse-to-fine means you have seen it with the pixelization, for instance. So first you encode a pixelized version of the image with a low frequency description of your image. And once you have encoded that, then you encode the next level of frequencies or the next level of pixelization and so on. So in very few coefficients, you already have an idea of how the image looks like. And somehow it is more or less similar to hierarchical. So hierarchical is more or less following this idea that the first somehow in the first numbers you have the information of the low frequency part of the image, and then the lossless is I want an exact recovery of the original image, so I don't want to lose anything in between. And here you have the same diagram that I did, but now with more explicit. So all this is the encoder, all this is the decoder. And in the encoder, you will do some images, some operations. So for instance, you have an image, you convert it from RGB to this luminance and chrominance code, and then you downsample the color, you partition it into 8 blocks and so on. And in the decoder, you have to do just the opposite. So the last operation here is an entropy encoder that we don't know what it is. But the first operation here has to be the opposite of this one. So it has to be the entropy decoder. And here you have a quantizer, so you have to do a dequantization. And here you have the forward discrete cosine transform. Here you need the inverse discrete cosine transform, and so on. So every step in the decoding has to be the opposite of the corresponding steps in the encoded. Okay, so yeah, so there are some basic ideas that are the ones that we will see. That are it is we will not see the whole standard. So the standard has many details. Yeah, we will pick a few of them. So it is a process that is based on the discrete cosine transform, and it assumes that the input images are 8-bit samples. So you have unsigned 8-bit numbers, so between 0 and 55. We will see mostly the sequential encoding, and we will see this Huffman coding that is part of the process. It is the Huffman coding is here. It is the entropy encoder. It is the Huffman one. And we will see that we separate between the constant components and the alternative components. So this is AC and DC component. DC is the constant and AC is the alternative one. So this is a zero frequency and non-zero frequency components. So let's see in more details. Okay, so first we need an image to test, and we will use this one. So this image has a lot of properties that are good for making a test. For instance, we have all the intensities from all the channels. So we have the RGB channels, and we go from 0 to 255 in each one of the channels, so we can analyze what is happening in each one of the channels. And we have a grayscale also. And we have also different frequencies. So, for instance, here we have a frequency, here we have another frequency, and we have a horizontal or vertical frequency, we have horizontal frequency. Yeah, actually this is horizontal, this is vertical. And we have also more frequencies here. So if you take any circle around here, the closer you are to the origin, the higher the frequency. So if you travel along this circle, then you have black and white and black and white. And the period of the black and white is much larger than if you travel along this circle. So in this inner circle, you go black and white much faster than if you are outside. And then you have two images. One of them is relatively smooth, the other one has a lot of details. So the relatively smooth means low frequency image, here you have a high frequency image. Okay, so this is a good test. So let's concentrate on this part of the test. So the first step was to decompose the RGB image into luminance and chrominance. And this is achieved with this matrix transformation. So you take the RGB code, each one of the components is between 0 and 255. You multiply by this matrix, and it is a fixed matrix, which is good. And then it is good because you don't have to compute cosines or sines or like we were doing with the how was it called? YSP or something like that, decomposition. So it is good that it has fixed numbers. So this is a relatively fast calculation. And then you add something to the final result. And this is our decomposition into chrominance, and luminance. Okay, the next step is to downsample the color bands. So this was our first decomposition, and now we reduce the color bands by a factor 2. And here you already see that we will be saving a lot of space, right? Okay, so these numbers. So we have originally, let's say that we have 3 bands of this size. So we have 3 n squared numbers. And now we have a luminance image that is of this size, but 2 images that are the chrominance ones, so chrominance ones that are of size n half squared. So now, instead of the original size, what we have is n squared, and then 1 plus 2. So this one, this is what is it? 1.5. So there is a reduction by a factor of 2 here. So the amount of numbers that we need to represent these downsample provenance images, this downsample image is 1/2 of the original set of numbers, which is an important saving, right? Okay, so there are more details to that one. That detail is because the original numbers, they were unsigned integers, so they were occupying 1 byte per pixel, while these ones are now floating numbers, and they take 4 bytes per pixel. But okay. So the next step is, there's a rounding actually. So you don't keep these numbers as floating numbers. You have to maintain an integer again, 8 bits again. Okay, then you divide the image into blocks of size 8 times 8. So you divide your input image into 8 times 8 pixels blocks. And then you shift all the image values from 0 to 255 to be centered at 0. So you subtract. So if they go from 0 to 2, and you have number of pixels p, a number of bits p, that this p is 8 typically. So you subtract 2 to the p minus 1. Okay, so now you go from -2 to the p minus 1 to 2 to the p minus 1 minus 1. Okay, so you go from 0 to 55 to -128 to 127. So you center it at 0. And then you do the forward discrete cosine transform. And the forward discrete cosine transform is something like the Fourier transform. Only that instead of producing complex value coefficients, you produce real value coefficients. But you have the same concepts as we had before. So yeah, so let's make a break here. The transform. So the Fourier transform by the frequency was the inner product between the image and a basis function. And this basis function depending on the frequency. This is W. So this letter and this letter are the same. So the same omega. So R is a space. So R is xy, and omega is omega x, omega y. So the Fourier transform was the inner product between the input signal and a basis function. So, and the basis function that we were using was this one. So, for the Fourier transform, we were having phi omega r was the complex exponential. That was minus of the inner product between omega and r. This was our basis function. Now we will use, instead of but this is a complex value image, right? So this is an image again, and it is a complex value. So this is equal to cosine of this inner product plus sine this inequality. So yeah, because of this is a complex value limit. Okay, so the discrete cosine transform is almost the same. So it is, instead of using this complex exponential, we will use something that is more similar to just the cosine. So it is taking the real part of the basic function of the Fourier transform. So this is just the real part. Okay, good. So yeah, this is the basis function of the DCT. This is the basis function of the Fourier transform. And there is a relationship between the two. So that is, this is the real part of the other one. Okay. So, but otherwise, everything looks the same. So you do the transform in the same way. You have to compute the inner product between the two images. So here we have all the basis functions for all the frequencies. So you know this guy looks likes the frequencies to be called V and U. I prefer omega x, omega y. I think it is more clear. But otherwise, so here you have low frequency, here you have very high frequency, and in this direction you are increasing the horizontal frequency, in this direction you are increasing the vertical frequency, and in the same way as in the discrete Fourier transform, you have the discrete Fourier transform. This is the continuous Fourier transform. So here omega can take any value, but in the discrete Fourier transform, let's do it here. So you know in the discrete Fourier transform, omega is restricted to a few values. So you have kx, ky. So this is a vector again. So you have 2 pi kx over n, 2 pi ky over n, assuming that the image is squared. And then kx and ky take value from 0, 1, and n minus 1. So here you have a finite set of frequencies. So if you have patches that are of size 8 times 8, what are the possible values for kx, ky? So kx, ky can go from 0, 1 to 7. And the same happens here. So when you take the real part of that, the same happens. So the possible frequencies, they can only take values between 0 and 7. So this U1 and V, the way they are written here, they are the kx, ky. They are not frequencies, but they are the index of that frequency. So they go from 0 to 7, and in V they go from 0 to 7. So 7 in both directions, it is the fastest oscillation you can have. So here you have this checkered board pattern. It is the fastest oscillation you can have. And then in the same way, in each one of the directions, these are faster bars that you can have, vertical bars and horizontal bars. So the fastest you can go, the discrete signal, is for this frequency. So in one dimension, the fastest signal you can have is this -1 to the power n, and it is the signal that has 1 minus 1, 1 minus 1, and the same here. So this is x of n, this is n, and this is 1, and this is -1. And it goes. And this is the same as x minus 0 times n. And this is the frequency. This is the frequency. That is why pi is the maximum frequency you can have. In a discrete signal. So these are the equivalent in images of these faster signals that we can have. So it is white and then black and then white again and then black again. So it is the fastest you can go. And if you go like that in both directions, then what you have is this checkerboard. And the slowest you can go is this one, where you have, well, the slowest in this finite set of frequencies. This is this pattern where you have a single cycle. So in the image, you have a single period of your sinusoid. So you go white and then black. This actually have a period, right? And then we go again. Forget about this one. So this is the minimum, this is the maximum, and you go again from the minimum to the maximum. So you have a period there. Okay, so we are making the inner product of the input patches. So these are the patches coming from the image, and we are computing the inner product of those patches with these basis functions. And for each one of the inner products, you will get a number. So here are the inner products. So the inner products, this is the forward discrete cosine transform. So you have the patch, and then the inner product with the basis function. And these lambdas, they are normalization factors. Normalization, we are not paying so much attention to normalization factors. So it is something that guarantees that when you go the forward direction and the backward direction, you recover the input image again. But we are not paying too much attention to those. Okay, so yeah, this is how this real part looks like. So rho and chi here is are the x and y coordinates. So here you are computing, for instance, so these basis functions, they're actually, you see, it is the product of two. So the way I explained it, it was just for a single one. So the way this real part of whatever, this real part of whatever, is just for one direction. But the way the basis function is constructed for considering both directions is by multiplying the cosine in one direction times the cosine in the other direction. And so you take one of the cosines, this is this one, you take the other cosine, that is this one, and then you multiply point by point. And you have this one, and now you compute the inner product. So the inner product is multiplying the basis function times the input image. So you multiply the basis function times the input image times point by point, and you have to compute the sum over all pixels. So now you compute the sum over all pixels. That gives you a number, and that number you have to put it somewhere. Okay, so what were the U and V indexes that you used? You used 4 and 4 here. Okay, so these are the the patterns correspond, these patterns corresponding to u equals 4. So this is equals 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it is this one. And the same, this is v equals 4. Okay, so I was using 4, 4, and I get this number. So I put that number here at the 4, 4 location. Okay, this is the same that you do with the Fourier transform. When you make these Fourier transforms and we organize it in the omega x omega y plane, we are doing the same. So we are representing in the omega x omega y plane, or here the UV plane or the kx ky plane, to represent what is the inner product. And the inner product is a single number. For the Fourier transform, is a complex number. For the discrete cosine transform, it is a real value number. And you do the same for all u and v's. So at the end, you will have this array that goes with u goes from 0 to 7 and v from 0 to 7. You would have all the numbers coming from all the inner products. Okay, so now our original part, this part is represented by these discrete cosine transforms. And it has the same property, the discrete cosine transform has the same property as the Fourier transform, that you can fully recover, you can invert the transformation. So from this, all the information here is contained there. So only that it is scrambled in a different way. But if I compute the inverse discrete cosine transform, I exactly recover this one. Okay, so now we have the discrete cosine transforms. So here it is again the same process, now explained differently. So you have the patch, you multiply it by the basis, and for every base, this basis looks different depending on u and v. And then you multiply the two point by point, and you sum that result. That is the definition of inner product. That will give you a number that you have to place at the u equal 4, v equal 4 location, or depends on what is your basis. Okay, so yeah, so most of the, so when you multiply the input by all these basis functions, most of them so for most inputs they look like this. And just to visualize it better, where the energy is. So we see that the energy is concentrated over low frequencies. So the low frequency components, they have more energy than the high frequency components. And this is a consequence of that we have already discussed a few times. So if you have an image, and again, I do 1D plots because they are easier to do. So if this is your frequency axis, normally the power spectra of all your images, they behave like the square root of the module of the frequency square. So that means that you have more energy at low frequency than at high frequency. And that happens again also in the discrete cosine transform. And then here we have different representations of that. Okay, now you apply your discrete cosine transform to the luminance bands and the chrominance bands. And you will use two quantization tables. Okay, so let's see how the quantization tables are used. Okay, so the quantization tables are fixed tables, and we will see how to use them now. But these tables, well, you have some numbers like 2, 3, somewhere between 1 and 15, or 0 and 15. And they are used in the following way. So let's say that this is our discrete cosine transform. Now this is our quantization table. So what we have to do is to divide this one, so the discrete cosine transform, by the quantization table. So here is this ratio, and then you have to round. So when you complete the rounding, so you are dividing 255 divided by 1, and you round 255. 23 divided by 1, and you round 3. So all these three numbers stay the same. 13 divided by 2, and you have to round. And well, it is 6.5, and it is rounded up to 7, and so on. So that means you already see this is the purpose of this quantization table. So what are the steps? What is the size of the step between one position and the next that you can represent? It is the number of the quantization table. So let's say, let's look at this. Just for simplicity, I will round down. Okay. So let's say that my output is the floor, because I am better drawing the floor rounding of x divided by delta. Okay, so now we will represent x, y. We can imagine that delta plays an important role in this floor, so I will make delta 2 delta 3 delta. Okay, so for all x between 0 and delta, what is the rounding down? Is 0. So all these values, so all those values are rounding down to 0. What about delta? So there is a hole there, and then delta is rounding down to 1. And for all these x, they are also rounded down to 1. And that is whole, and then for 2 goes to 2, and so on. So what are the values that I can represent in x? I can represent 1 delta, 2 deltas, 3 deltas. So I'm going in steps of delta. So the larger the delta, the less accurate I will be. Actually, if delta is 1, and this x is an integer value, so this x is a value between 0 and 55, then it is this line. So what I'm doing by discretizing it is approximating this line by some steps. And the size of this is the step is delta. Actually, it is delta in both directions. It's delta there and delta there. Okay, good. So what does it mean? That I'm more accurate quantizing the low frequency components than the high frequency components. And also, in the low frequency components, there is a little bit of asymmetry. You see, this number is 2, while this number is 1. Why is that? Because those two coefficients, they have the same frequency. One is horizontal frequency, the other one is vertical frequency. So why am I more accurate in this direction than in the horizontal direction than in the vertical direction? Because of our visual system. Our visual system has more resolution in horizontal than in vertical. So we have to pay more attention to the errors that we commit in horizontal and to the errors we commit in vertical. Yeah, that is another property. Yeah, why this is saving space? Okay, so let's say that our original numbers are between 0 and 255. How many bits do you need to represent these numbers? How many bits? 8 bits. Okay, so let's say that our delta, is 8. So that's to put easy numbers. So this is 2 to the 3. So what about y? What is the possible range of y? Y has to go from 0 to, so y belongs from 0 to, what is the maximum ratio you can have? Which one is it? 31. That is 2 to the 5 minus 1. But this is the maximum ratio I can have with the floor, right? So this one is 2 to the 8 minus 1. And if I divide by 2 to the 3, the maximum ratio is 2 to the 5 minus 1. That is 31. This is equal to 31. So how many bits do I need to store y? 5 bits. So what is the compression ratio now? So the new images, there are many details, but the new images on average would be 5 divided by 8 times smaller. So how much is this? Which is more or less something like 60 something, no? 62%, right? So my new images are 62% smaller than the original ones. So remind, our goal is to save space. Okay, okay, good. So we use a quantization table. We understand now the properties for these horizontal and vertical properties. And if we look at the chrominance and luminance quantization tables, we see that the chrominance quantization tables very quickly they get into high numbers. So they very quickly go from 1 to 12, from 3 to 12. See, at very low frequency, we already find 13. While for the luminance, we still have relatively low numbers, at least compared to these ones. So that is again based on our visual system. We are much more sensitive to luminance than to chrominance. So we will pay more attention to encode correctly the luminance coefficients. Okay, so yeah. So that is, so let's say that I keep only one coefficient. So I do that for all the discrete cosine table. So this is my quantized discrete cosine table. And I set all the coefficients to 0, except the DC component, except the 0, frequency. So I keep the 255, but all the other coefficients I set them to 0. What is now the saving? So let's think in terms of numbers, okay, not in terms of bits. But I had a discrete cosine transform. So I had, I don't know what the discrete cosine transform, but this is the discrete cosine transform. This number I keep, so this one I keep. but all the others I removed. The size of this was 8 times 8. If I keep a single number, what is the saving? So I need only to keep 1/64 of the original size. This is 1%. This is 1% of my original data. So with only 1% of my original data, I try to recover the image, and this is what I get. It is not a total disaster. It is not a good image. It is not a total disaster. And I'm keeping just one coefficient per patch. Okay, now let's concentrate on the DC components. So this only applies to the 0 frequency components. Okay, so if you consider one block, that block will have a value, I don't know, 15. Next block will have a value of 15. The next block will have a value of 15, and then the next block takes a value of 22, and so on. Okay, so here we have blocks. And here we have the 0 DCT component of the DCT transform. Okay, how many bits do I need to represent the DCT transform? So the DCT transform, the DC, look at so the quantization delta is 1. So how many bits do you need for the DC component? 8 bits. Okay, 8 bits. So, but now, instead of that, I will do something different. That is, instead of sending you, so one possibility, let's say, let's divide our image in blocks. So I have my input image. So this is my input image. I divide them in blocks of size 8 times 8. So I have a lot of blocks like this. And what I'm sending you are these numbers. Okay, so and for each one of these numbers, I need 8 bits for each number. Okay, but let's look at, for instance, this guy here. So let's look at the test image again. So this guy here has a lot of details. But what about this one? So very often images, they have wide, smooth areas. So what about the DC component of a smooth image? For instance, an image like this, that is a background and then something in the foreground. So all these values will be almost the same, right? So that means that adjacent blocks will have similar DC components. So we go here. That is what is happening. So adjacent blocks, they have similar DC components. What if instead of sending you the DC component, I send you the difference with the previous one? So instead of sending you 15, 15, 15, and then 22, 22, 22, I send you the difference. So the first one will be 15, but then the next one will be 0, 0, 0. When you have 22, I have to send you 7. Okay, because it is the difference between the 22 that you have here and the 15 that you have here. So these numbers, it is a random guess now, but on average, do you think that these numbers, to represent these numbers, I will need the same amount of bits as this one? On average, these numbers will be smaller. So smaller numbers means less bits. So I can send the DC components with this differential PCM. The differential PCM is just sending the differences. And for the differences, you need fewer numbers, fewer bits. Okay, next. Okay, so now let's look at the AC components. The AC are the ones that are not 0,0 frequency. So all the others. So if I look at all the others, we say low frequency components, they have more energy. So I will traverse this matrix starting from the low frequency numbers. So my path will be the following. So I start here, and then I give you this one, and then this one, and then this one. So this will be my traveling path. So in this example, it would be 23, then 19, then 29, and then 5, then 4, then 34, and so on. So I will encode these numbers in following this path. And now I have given the discrete cosine transform as a vector. Okay, good. Now, we will convert this. This vector is called a stream. Okay? So we have this stream, and we will convert this stream to a variable length code. Okay. So in this variable length code, we will have kind of symbols. A symbol that is run length and size, and the other symbol that is an amplitude. Okay, let's see this in more details. So for the AC, we have to say what is the run length, so the number of consecutive zero values, and the size that is used to encode the amplitude, and then the quantized amplitude. So this run length, so we already reasoned that in this discrete cosine, in these quantized tables that we have to send, there will be a lot of zeros, because the high frequency components will have low values, and because of the delta, they will be rounded to 0. So there will be a lot of zeros there. So I have to send how many consecutive zeros I have, and what is the number of bits to encode the next amplitude, and then the amplitude. And that is for the AC. For the DC, we do it differently. The run length is not included, so we never say how many consecutive zeros we have. And then we give the size as the number of bits to encode the amplitude, and this goes from 1 to 11, and then the quantized value. Okay, so let's see. So, yeah, you may have observed these AC components, the number of bits used, they go from 1 to 10. The DC, they go from 1 to 11. Okay, so, yeah, this table is shared by the AC from 1 to 10, and the DC goes from 1 to 11. Okay, next, I will send you this size. How many bits do I need to send in the size? Four bits. I need only 4 bits because I have only to transmit 11 values at most. Okay, then with my, so let's say that in this stream we also do this differential encoding, right? Okay, so we compute. I will not send you the these numbers, but the difference with the previous one. So 23 minus 90, so it will be 23 minus 4 plus 10 minus 25, so on. Okay, so I have to set all these positive and negative numbers. Okay, so when the size is 1, I will send minus 1 on 1. How many bits do I need to send this to? 1 bit. And it is 1 bit, and it is a very common value, because as we have reasoned before, many of the nearby blocks, they have nearby single values. So this value will be very common, and it requires only 1 bit. What about this one? So when the size is 2, I will be able to send minus 3 minus 2, 2 and 3. The minus 1 and 1, I don't need to send anymore, because they have already been sent with a symbol of size 1. How many bits do you need to transmit this thing? 2 bits, because there are 4 values. And then minus 7, minus 6, minus 5, minus 4, and then 4, 5, 6, 7. So I have 8 values there, so I need 3 bits, 4 bits, and so on. So this is a very clever way of saving bits. So when you have to transmit a low number, and these low numbers are the ones that are more frequent, because the differences between one coefficient and the next will be small, and now you realize why we have organized these numbers in this way. Because the low frequency components that are more similar to each other, they're close in the data stream. And then the high frequency components are also close to each other. They are similar to each other because they have low numbers. They are at the end of the stream. Okay, so we have seen a few ideas from the standard. The standard is very complex, but you can see that they make a lot of kind of clever decisions at every point to try to save space. And okay, so let's see what is the size of these. What is the size that you can get, and what is the quality that you can get with some examples. Okay, so yeah, we don't have the size of these images, but let's say a typical one. How large is your camera in your phone? How many pixels do you have? 4K is typical number. 4K pixels. It is 4K in each direction, right? So you have images of size 4K, 4K. How many pixels do you have? 16 megapixels, right? So if every pixel is taking 3 bytes, each 1 byte for each of the channels, what is the size of this? 48 megabytes. Okay, so we don't know the original size of this image because it is not written here. But we can see that a 48 megabytes image is stored in less than 1 megabyte. So that is a compression by a factor of 44. 48. Now, and even better, larger, because this is not 1, it is smaller than 1. But still, I can make it 10 times smaller, and still I see the image pretty well. It is 10 times smaller. So what are the things, or what are the obvious things that you can touch on to make it smaller? The deltas. So this quantization table, you can play with the quantization table to have more or less bits at the output. Okay, so we can make it 10 times smaller and still have a very good size. So here actually you have what is the size of the file as a function of the quality. The quality can be encoded from 0 to 12, and then you are choosing not only the delta, so not only the quantization table, but we are also making some more decisions in the standard. But also very often it is recorded between 0 and 100. But even the 0 quality JPEG, it is sufficient for many purposes. Okay, so yeah, so we have been looking at the content. So you may remember that at the beginning of the lecture we were distinguishing between header and content. So we have been talking about the content. What about the header? So if you want to look at the header, for instance, there are some programs to look at the header of these images. So let's take this image, and the headers, they make use of flags. Okay, so these are flags or data markers. Okay, so we have flags, each one with a different meaning. So for instance, there is one flag that is start of image. That is FFD8. How many bits, how many bytes do you need for representing that? 2 bytes. Okay, so every JPEG file, let's look at the header again. So we have the header here. We decided in our very extremely simple header that the first number would be the size in X, the second the size in Y. Okay, so the convention in JPEG is that every single file, the header was blue. So let's make it blue. So this is the header of the JPEG. So every single file in JPEG, they start with FFD8. So those are 2 bytes. And the meaning of that is a start of image. So how do you know that you have a JPEG file? You look at the first 2 bytes, and if they are FFD8, then it is a JPEG file. What is next? Then you have many other messages. So you have, we have not defined the concept of frames, the concept of progressive frames. So we were saying you can do the analysis at different frequencies and so on. But so you have flags for a start of frame, or a baseline frame, a progressive frame. You have labels to save your Huffman table, to define the quantization table. The Huffman table we haven't seen. So what we haven't seen what the Huffman encoded is. Those of you in electrical engineering probably you know. Have you seen the Huffman code? Yeah. Also in biomedical engineering, where they have random signals. Okay, so you know what they have included. So you have a space to save the Huffman table, to save the quantization table. So for instance, let's say that at some point I want to save my quantization table. So I will write in the header a few things. I'm writing in the header a few things. And at some point, I want to save my quantization table. So I write FFDB, and this is a start of quantization table. And then I write here my quantization table. So a file format is a lot, or implies two things. One is how you will how you will deal with the content, and we have seen a bit of the ideas behind. The other one is how you will deal with the header. So in the header, you can define different fields, and you have flags for defining what you are going to say. And then you have some space, some bytes to write what you want to save there. Okay, so I can save my quantization tables here. Tables. And you can save many things. So you can save the half-man tables, the quantization tables. You can save even information coming from the application that has generated this image. You can save comments. And at the end, when you are fully done, you have to finish your message. You have to finish your file, and all the JPEG files, they finish with FFD9. Okay. And then you can look at, for instance, with this, this is a very convenient, this is good for machines, but very inconvenient for people. And then people can look at the header with some program. And then this program tells you, okay, so at this location we have this FFDA, and then the next, after 2 bytes, we have 28 bytes that are coming from Photoshop 3.0. You see the content of the header. So now, for instance, what do you think? And here you have all the content, but we don't care about the small details. Only that there are programs that allow you to look into that. Okay, so now, what do you think if I have here? I have here my file.jpg. My program doesn't understand JPEG, so I change the extension to my file.gif. What do you think? It is just renaming of the file. This is a disaster. It cannot work. Because every file format, JPEG is one, GIF is another one, is making a lot of assumptions of how you will write your content and how you will write your header. If you don't follow those rules, it doesn't matter if it is called JPEG or GIF. The program that, for instance, let's say that you make a program to read JPEGs. So if you rename from a GIF to JPEG, this file is not following these rules. So you cannot understand a word from there. Okay, any question? That is all. Esto es lo más útil que había tenido en todo el curso. No cambiar los nombres de los ficheros por la cara. ¿De qué? Sí. Y esto mismo, o sea, lo he enseñado en imágenes, pero aplica a todo. Todos los ficheros de todo el mundo asumen que están escritos siguiendo unas reglas. Si tú no sigues esas reglas, da igual que le cambies el nombre, que no sigues esas reglas. Muy bien. Bueno, pues a partir de ahora, práctica todo el día.